This is an excerpt from Light Beneath Ashes, a memoir by Boaz Anglad. It recounts the author's visit to a camp for victims of the Haiti 2010 earthquake, following his internship at a human rights law firm in Port-au-Prince, where he prepared a report on living conditions in the camps. The complete audiobook is available on Audible and iTunes.
I arrived at the camp late in the morning. The sky was clear, almost too vivid for what surrounded it. "You can wait here," I told the driver as I stepped out and closed the door behind me. The camp had once been a park. You could still see traces of its past. A broken swing set in one corner, a concrete bench with faded paint in another. I stepped forward, avoiding a patch of mud, placing my feet carefully on stones someone had scattered into a narrow walkway. Tents stretched across the field, stitched together from tarps, scraps of plastic, and old banners, trembled in the wind like fragile bodies. There was no electricity, no running water, just smoke, dust, and the faint smell of something burning. A woman sat outside one of the tents, struggling to light a charcoal stove, her infant latched to her breast. She didn't look up. Lines of metal wire ran from one corner to another, heavy with clothes drying in the sun. As I kept walking, two young boys approached me, palms open. I gave them what little change I had. They said thank you, but their eyes stayed on me, like they were hoping I might have something more. I walked deeper into the camp, stopping to speak with anyone who felt like talking. A few spoke about the dream of returning home someday, though they weren't sure life would be any different from how it was now. Some spoke of illness, but there was nowhere to go, no hospital around, and no transport to get them there, even if there was. People moved slowly, some bandaged, others limping, protecting old injuries that had never been treated. Others sat in silence, staring into the distance, as if speech required too much effort. Most were malnourished. Occasionally, a relief organization would come through to distribute food, but not everyone received it. The elderly were often left out, too weak to push through the crowds. Some people spoke quietly about what it took to survive. One young woman confided in me. A male camp manager had asked her for favors, just to secure a spot near the front of the food line. One man told me the government had come through once, promised to return, and said they'd relocate the families at the camp. That was months ago, he said, without bitterness. I stayed a few more minutes, walking slowly between the tents, as if delaying the moment I'd have to leave. But there was only so much I could take in before it all began to feel too heavy. I got back in the car and we started to drive off. The camp grew smaller behind us, fading into the distance. After a while, I noticed I hadn't said a word. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, but my voice didn't quite sound like mine. I stared out the window, unsure what exactly I was feeling. I had come to help, I told myself. I had the degrees, the models, the data. But now, after everything I'd seen, I wasn't sure who that work was really for, whether anything I had written would ever touch the lives of the people I had just met, whether the gap between their reality and my research was wider than I allowed myself to believe. Sitting in the back of the car, I found myself thinking back to a few weeks earlier, when our church had been contacted by a non-profit organization working in Haiti. They introduced themselves as missionaries and said a team from the US would be visiting to serve us, in the Christian sense of the word. My mother, upon learning this, offered to host them at our house. I had heard of these impact trips before. They always struck me as curated experiences, part mission, part business. When I checked the organization's website, the suspicion was confirmed. The trips weren't cheap. Some cost nearly $1,000, covering flights and lodging. In return, participants were promised the opportunity to serve Haitians and leave having made a difference in their lives. The missionaries came soon after, a dozen young white Americans, none older than 20, accompanied by an interpreter and someone they called their team leader. They wore matching T-shirts with Bible verses printed on the back. As soon as they reached the house, they started setting up tents in our courtyard. "If we're here to serve Haitians, we should live like them," one of them said. My mother saw them from her living room window and shook her head. "That's not how we receive guests," she said quietly, and opened 2 empty rooms for them instead. The next morning, she had already organized a team to cook them 3 meals a day. The missionaries stayed for a week. In the mornings, they went door to door through the neighborhood, stopping to pray or talk with people. One of our family friends brought them to the orphanage where she worked. They played with the children, took photos, asked questions. In the afternoons, they returned to the house to eat, then gathered in a circle to sing worship songs, one strumming a guitar while the others swayed gently, eyes closed. Before they left, they held a service at the church. One by one, they stood to speak, and almost without exception, they said the same thing. We came here hoping to change lives, but Haiti changed us. I was probably the only one who didn't feel moved by their testimonies. I'd seen this kind of reaction before. What they meant, what they didn't say, was that they had been struck by the poverty. The people who had so little could still smile, still sing, still thank God. It humbled them. They used the word resilient a lot. It was one of those words you kept hearing after the earthquake whenever people talked about Haiti. But by then, it had started to wear thin. What did they really mean by resilient? That we Haitians had some mythic capacity to endure? That we were built to absorb pain, to weather disaster after disaster without breaking? Or was it just another way of saying that our struggle was permanent, that hardship was part of who we were? If it hadn't been for their sincerity, for the sense that they genuinely believed they were answering God's call, I might have said something. I might have told them that what they're doing wasn't helping the way they thought, that their presence here wasn't really about us, that their fixation on our resilience wasn't reverent, it was convenient, a way of feeling better about the fact that after all the songs and testimonies, nothing had really changed. Now, sitting in the back of that car with my internship coming to an end, I found myself wondering if I was any different from those young Americans. I had come here with good intentions. I had drafted a report I hoped would mean something, maybe even lead to change. But in that moment, none of it felt solid. I had judged the young Americans for their naivety, for the way they arrived with matching t-shirts and easy smiles, convinced they could change lives in a week. But now I was asking a harder question. Had I done the same? Had I written myself into this story as a necessary presence, someone meant to help, without fully reckoning with what help actually meant, or whether it was even mine to offer? I had walked through those camps, seen what there was to see, and then stepped into an air-conditioned car, headed to a house where a clean bed was waiting. I would leave soon, back to my routines, and the people I had met, the woman venting the charcoal stove, the man waiting for the government to relocate him, the boys with their palms open would still be there, waiting, enduring. I thought about the figures in my report, the odds, the percentages, the graphs. I still believed in that work, still believed that evidence mattered. But I also knew what it couldn't capture. It couldn't measure the quiet resignation in a man's voice when he said no one had come. It couldn't qualify what it meant for a girl to trade her dignity for a ration of rice. It couldn't map the full distance between policy and survival. The driver turned down a side street, heading back toward the office. I looked out the window and watched the city bend and stretch around us, busy and bruised and somehow still breathing. "You sure you're okay?" the driver asked. "You seem distant." "Yeah," I said. "I'll be all right."